Forup. I'm owner and president of a company called Information Technology Associates. We focus on developing, supporting business and financial software. Like most of you, I started with FoxPro for DOS back in the late 80s, early 90s. I went to VFP as soon as it was released, and I've been working full time in Visual FoxPro since then, and picked up SQL Server starting about 5 years after that. So back when certification was a thing, I was able to pick up certification in Visual FoxPro and SQL Server. And I had the pleasure of working with some really smart people on a couple of books, which I think still have value today. Here's what we're going to do today. We're going to talk about what the foundation classes are in general, where to find them on your machine. They are installed with Visual FoxPro. And we'll talk about different ways you can explore them. There are 112 classes in the foundation classes. That's a lot of stuff. So there's more than one way to kind of look around and see what there is and what might be of interest to you. The bulk of the presentation is going to be working with a handful of the applications and showing how to use them in your applications, which is really the whole point, making these classes available with little or no programming to enhance our applications. We'll wrap up by showing how the classes can be extended and subclassed if you need to modify their behavior. And finally, how the foundation classes are licensed, which is important for our ability to modify and redistribute what we've done. So what are the foundation classes? The definition, I really don't like reading slides, but there it is for you. Enhancing our VFP apps with little or no programming. That's the intent. All of the foundation classes are packaged in visual class libraries, but not all of them are designed to be visual. Some of them are non-visual for use in a program. All of them, regardless of their form, come with source code. So that's great news because when we're exploring them, it means we can look at the source code. At a minimum, we can figure out how they work. And beyond that, if we decide we want to enhance them or extend them or modify them or subclass them, we have the ability to do that. I left this slide in on purpose, even though it's not perhaps as relevant as it was when I first did this presentation a number of years ago, but the links to some of these things have changed, so I left this in here. Back in the day, Xsource, Sedna, and VFPX were all kind of new, so this slide is sort of help us remember what all of those things are. The FoxPro Foundation classes, or FFC, are developed by Microsoft. They are distributed with FoxPro, and they are the foundation classes. Xsource, which is also by Microsoft and also distributed with VFP, actually is installed as a zip file, and that's the source code for the XBase tools. Sedna came along a little later, a set of tools for helping us extend VFP, also developed by Microsoft, but not distributed with Visual FoxPro. And finally, VFPX, which really has two meanings. VFPX is all of the additional enhancements developed by the community. It is not distributed with Visual FoxPro, but VFPX also refers to the website. So when we talk about VFPX, we may be talking about the website itself. The link has changed from the old days, and it's now vfpx.github.io. I hope everybody is familiar with VFPX. If you click on the projects link on the homepage, you'll find a list of all the projects, and there are many, many of them in VFPX. FFC is one of them, and it's at github.com/vfpx/ffc. Again, you don't need to memorize that link. It's available from the homepage. You will want to use the VFPX version, and I will tell you why in just a couple of minutes. So where do we find the FoxPro Foundation classes? They are installed in your program files folder, Microsoft VFP9 in the FFC folder. For some reason in the file system, that folder is named capital F, lowercase fc. I always capitalize the whole thing in whenever I'm talking about it in my slides. I'll continue to do that. But again, there are 112 classes in 39 class libraries, so there's a pretty big variety of stuff there. When VFP9 SP2 came along, there were some important updates, two in particular, the report listener and the FRX cursor. Unfortunately, there were bugs in those classes, which is why it's important to get the VFPX version. So how do you do that? Well, you download or clone the FFC project from VFPX, and these are the three fixes in particular that you will find. The first is a fix for the set talk bug in the report listener class, which Kathy Poutney discovered and wrote a fix for some time ago. Kathy also documented this on her own, and you may be able to find documentation on that. The second one was a fix in the FRX cursor class, which Joel Leach provided again some time ago. The third is a bug in the GDI Plus class, the GP graphics class, which also Kathy found and wrote a fix for. She published this quite some time ago, but until last month, this was not in the VFPX version. So this is new. As of April 20th, the GDI Plus fix is in the VFPX version of the FoxPro Foundation classes. So even if you have the VFPX version from some time ago before that date, I suggest you download the new one to get that fix. When you apply the changes, you're going to be replacing the class libraries for those three in your program files x86 folder. So of course, it'll require administrative privileges to do that. My personal preference is to rename the old ones. I used _original, and then to put the new ones in, the ones that contain the fixes from VFPX, under their original names. So that's what FoxPro will use, rather than just replacing the originals with the new one. The reason is that way it's clear that I have the new ones in place, as opposed to trying to determine from, say, the date and timestamp, which is unreliable. So again, this is just a personal preference, but if you run File Explorer in administrative mode, you can make these changes and then dump the VFPX ones into the program files folder. So how do we explore the FoxPro Foundation classes? To get started, just a word about the naming conventions. There is an _base class library that is the base classes for all of the FFC. I should modify that, for most of the FFC. So class libraries within the foundation classes that begin with an underscore are derived from the _base class. For example, environment, hyperlink, movers, and so on. There are other classes that are not derived from the _base class library. And registry is one of those, and we'll spend some time looking at the registry today. 4 ways that I can think of to help you get started exploring the foundation classes. The help file, first of all, contains actually quite a bit of good information about them. And I'll give you a handful of topics in just a minute that I'd suggest would be a good starting place. As with any class library, you can explore them with the class browser. So if you like to just dig in and get your hands dirty, open the class browser, open a foundation class library, choose a class, open it up, look at the code, see what's in there. So that's certainly one way to do it. 2 other ways are actually provided by Visual FoxPro. One of those is the component gallery, again, another tool that many of us may have forgotten even exists. And we'll see an example of that in a few minutes. And the last one is solution samples, also provided by Visual FoxPro off the tools menu, and something that, again, some of us may have forgotten even exists. So in the help file, here are 4 topics that I suggest are a good starting place. Guidelines is kind of an overview of what they are and how to use them. The list of classes A to Z is simply an alphabetic listing. It's good for scanning and seeing what's there. I also included that same list as an appendix to the white paper, so you have it there. Two other help file topics that I think would be useful are the component gallery object members, which gives you some kind of a guide to what to expect in the component gallery. And then also there's a help topic on the foundation class samples. So let's take a look at some of those. I'm not going to go into the help file, but I wanted to show the class browser. Obviously, you don't need to know how to launch it. This is kind of a carryover from an older slide, but let's take a look and go into FoxPro and see what the class browser looks like. So we'll run the class browser, and we can open either the code in the program files folder if you want to, or you can open the one in VFPX. On my particular machine, everything I download from VFPX, I put in the VFPX folder. Otherwise, we can look at the program files folder, Visual FoxPro 9, and there's the FFC. So here are all the class libraries. If we pick one, we can open this guy and take a look at what's in there, several classes. We're actually going to spend some time with the dialog class at some point. So if you want to modify it, there's a basic class, and there are some subclasses and so forth. So the class browser is a good way just to look into the guts and the internals of any of these classes. The component gallery, and the next will be the solution samples, are two tools that are provided by Visual FoxPro to help us work with many things, including the foundation classes. On this slide, there is a icon for a demo. Any place in this presentation where I have a demo uh, will have that icon. And if I pass by a slide and don't do the demo, somebody please holler, let the organizer know, and they can prod me to get that done. The component gallery um, contains classes that are grouped into catalogs. And so you kind of have to know what catalog to look in, which is, I think in the white paper, I made the analogy of hunting for an item in the grocery store. You kind of have to know what group it's in. So you might look one place and have to go and look at another place. Anyway, the component gallery is launched from the tools menu. There it is. And among other things, the foundation classes are part of this. So here we go. Here's the foundation classes arranged into catalogs. And if we choose one, for example, the dialogues, we can see the various classes that are in there, including the about dialogue, which we're going to spend some time on later on. But one of the things you can do from the component gallery is to right click, several choices there, but you can also look at you can either open or you can actually run a sample that's provided by Visual FoxPro itself, by Microsoft. So let's go ahead and run that just for example here. And you'll notice there are several different things within the dialog one. One of them is the about box that we'll spend some time modifying later. So here's a way to take a look at the foundation classes through the component gallery. And again, you can explore just by clicking on each of these catalogs in turn and seeing what's there. The task manager allows you to access the solution samples. One thing about the task pane manager, is that you, on a later machine like Windows 10, Windows 11, you may find you get an error when you try and run it, that the MSXML 4.0 core services is required. In the white paper, there's a link to where you can download that. You may have to install it on your machine. Thanks to Rick Schumer for providing that link. That was from his session last year on installing Visual FoxPro on a modern developer's machine, and included that link in my white paper with his permission. So you'll go to the task pane manager, the foundation classes node, and then from there you can read descriptions and open or run a sample. Let's take a look at that. And it takes a little bit of time for the task pane manager to come up. We're going to be interested in solution samples. So we'll give it just a minute to come up here. I think it's going online to fetch things from wherever it gets them. So hopefully we'll have something here in just a second. If not, we will move on. There we go. So again, many things in the solution samples, one of which is the foundation classes. So if we look there, we see that there's a list. Certainly not all of the foundation classes are represented, but many of them are. And there's a couple of different ways you can look at these things. For example, let's look at add navigation to forms. There's a link, there's a description, and there's an icon over here. The icon allows you to view the code. So here's the form in design mode, and you can actually go into the code and see what the various parts of it do. You can also run the example or the sample by clicking on the link. So now we're running actually live. I'm not going to do anything with this because we'd have to get a table and you can tell what the buttons are going to do. But again, these are samples provided by Microsoft and accessible through the Task Pane Manager via solution samples. I didn't say so earlier, but I'd like to say now, the session runs pretty much the entire time. If you have questions, would you please let the organizer know? And if we have time, we'll take them at the end of the session. There is also a Q&A following the end of the scheduled time, and we can take questions there. So now that we've looked at how to explore them, let's take a look at how we can actually use some of these. And I picked a small number of them, which I thought lend themselves well to demonstration. So the first one is the Registry Access Foundation class. We'll spend quite a bit of time on that. The second one, a quickie, is the mouse over effects. This one just kind of intrigued me because I had no idea what mouse over effects actually were. And so it turned out to be kind of fun to play with that one. The About dialog box is the one we saw just a moment ago when we were exploring. And I want to show how to what that is and how to modify that and make it suitable for your application in your company. Along the way, that provides a good place to introduce a couple of other little foundation classes, namely the hyperlink and the file version. So we will add those to our dialog box as we see the example. And then to wrap up our demonstrations, I want to show the mover and super mover classes. Again, a lot of functionality right out of the box in those. And finally, the shell execute foundation class, which is useful for running whatever the default application is for any kind of a file uh, on the system. So the registry access class, first of all, the class name is registry. The library is registry.vcx. If you're in the component gallery, it's in the utilities catalog. Quick word about registry organization. I don't know how many of you or how often anymore any of us have to work in the registry, but we talk about keys and values. To me, those are like file paths and folders and files within a folder. A key is like a path. A value is like a folder, and then there are contents within those values. So that's just the kind of terminology we'll be talking about. The registry class methods that we'll be using allow us to query the registry. Is there a key? Yes or no? We can read and write. There are a couple different ways to do that. One of them is kind of a macro approach. The other one is more of a do-it-yourself approach. So we'll see examples. You can delete keys or you can delete values. I'm not going to delete anything here because I don't want to monkey with my registry on a demo, but they do exist. Open and close key are sort of internal. They return or reset a numeric value that the registry class uses internally for the rest of its functionality. And finally, there are a couple of enumeration methods where you can enumerate keys and or key values. So let's take a look at some demos for those. And I have a demonstration class here. First of all, there are four primary keys in the registry, and they have those names: classes, root, current user, local machine, and users. Those have bit values, which you can define as defined constants. So in a program, you might want to use those defined constants and then refer to them by name throughout your program. I won't be doing that here because things will go out of scope as I step through these examples. So what I'm going to do is create a public instance. Normally you'd create it as local of the registry object. Then I'm going to use a variable to contain the root key for HKey current users. That's this guy up here. And then finally, some memory variables that we need to work with the various examples. So let's go ahead and do that and get all of that in place. And now that it's there, we can start running some examples. I left the space at the top because that's where the feedback is going to come up, if anything, if it returns a result that we can look at. So if we want to check if a registry key exists, first of all, we can define what key we're looking for. And I just chose a basic one for demonstration purposes. That's the typical arrangement in the software key, where you'd have your company name, your product name, your version name, and then whatever else you want to have within that. So that's what we're going to be working with. And that actually does exist. Let me get to the registry. And there it is. So this is the registry editor. ITA, we're in current user software. ITA My VFP app version 1, and there are 2 keys within that, application settings and user preferences, that have different values that we can work with. So we want to know if that exists. We'll call the isKey method. And because it does exist, we should get a true, which we do. So that's good. For creating them, we can use the set key value along with open key. And since they already exist, I can go ahead and run this. It won't hurt anything. But what I wanted to point out is that there is a parameter that means created if it doesn't already exist. So that's kind of a good way of being able to rerun something. It doesn't hurt anything if it's already there, but it creates it if it's not there. So we'll go ahead and execute that. Again, it won't change anything because it already exists. In the same way, we could create the other application setting. In this example, the first setting is where is the app installed. The second is where is the data. So this is kind of old school where the data would be DBS and so forth, maybe even on the same drive, or it could be on a network share or whatever. The user preferences similarly can be created. Um, in this example, I have one that says, do we want to ask yes or no? Do we want to exit the app, or do I want to prompt for print preview or go straight to the printer? So we could run those again. We're using the set reg key option to do those, or the set reg key method. Some other examples, and by the way, all of this is in the session downloads, uh, so you have access to all of this and can work with it on your own. We can ask about a register key. We can use a get instead of a set. So if I want to know what the data directory is and read it out of the registry, we can see that the value in that key is C:\data ITA my VFP app. So again, arbitrary, but just by way of example. Similarly, we can query another key. Ask on exit is currently set to no, which I think is what we saw. Yes, it's currently set to no. So it is reading from the registry. Examples of using the open key and get key value directly. I won't go through those, but I do want to talk about the enumeration methods. So enum keys asks what keys are within this key. So we go ahead and run that, and what we would expect is what we'll see. This returns, and it's prompting me because it already exists. I can show you that. That's what it's saying. So yes. So I'm just dumping that array to a file, or I'm sorry, displaying memory, and then or dumping it to a file and then displaying that. And I did it on purpose to a file because I'll be using that later on. So this says there are 2 keys within that key. If you want to see the values, similarly, we can look at the ones for user preferences just by way of example, and we can use the enum key values method, and that will return those to us that way in an array. Just for example, if we want to look at what open key does, it just returns a numeric value. So again, this is kind of internal. You don't typically need to mess with it, but if you're using this in your app just to show what it does, you'll get a value. This value appears to change every time I run this, so I don't know what it's doing internally, but it works. So that's all you need to care about. And if you close a key, it simply resets it to 0. And finally, I'm going to just clear up all of the stuff that I did here. And again, all of this is in the session downloads for you. So that was a quick tour of the registry class. Within the registry class, interestingly enough, there is a subclass to handle INI files. I tend to call them INI files. I don't know if that's true or not. Anybody watch Severance? There are INI files. Maybe there's OUTI files too. I don't know. Anyway, I'll call them INI files. The class name is old INI reg. The class is registry, again, in the utilities catalog. And the two methods that we're going to be interested in are get ini entry and write ini entry. And of course, we have a demo for that. Did I just hear a rim shot? Actually, I want to show the file first. This is the file. This is my vfpapp.ini. And if we were to handle these options in an INI file rather than in the registry, it might look like this. So INI files have a name, they have a section name, and they have entries that have values. So that's what we're going to be working with. And again, sort of along the same lines as the other one, I want to set some public stuff here so I have access to it as we go through and keep everything in scope. So if I want to ask about the value of an INI file entry, then I simply have to provide a place to put the return value, and then I have to name the file and the section in the entry. One of the things I don't like is the order that these are in, and that's why I'm going to subclass this later on in the presentation. But this works, of course, out of the box. And the value is no, which I think is what we saw. Yes. Which one was that? That was the ask on exit. So that's no right here. We can set the value with write entry. So let's change that to yes. And now if we inquire, we could run this again, or I can just flip over to look at the file. It's been changed. So now that's yes, which kind of proves that it works. And I will just go ahead and clean up after this little demo. So that's kind of nice. INI files, in my experience, are still widely used for anything where you need to be able to make changes or even just to look at it without having to use a special tool like the registry editor, since they're simply text files. Mouse over effects. Uh, this one again is kind of fun. It's a very simple little one. It's called underscore mouse over FX in the UI class library under the user's control catalog. And the two methods that we're going to be interested in are ones called highlight me and cancel highlight. I'm going to show you two demos. First, I'm going to show you the way that the sample behaves the way Microsoft provided it. And then I'm going to tell you why I think we can do better. And I'll show you another example of that. Well, first of all, we have a form which is the way it looks out of the box. So this simple form has two buttons. And in the mouse move method, in this example, it simply calls the highlight me method. Now, you also have a choice of colors. And for demonstration purposes, I chose red and blue just because they show up well. Naturally, this is probably not what you're going to do in a real application. You would choose some nice shades of gray that would complement the command box or whatever control you're working with the way that you would actually want to show it in an application. But again, red and blue just simply work for this demonstration. So if we run the form, what do you think will happen when I mouse over those command buttons? Well, there you go. You got a red on top and a blue on the bottom. That's the highlight color and the shadow color. What I don't like about this is watch what happens when I move the mouse off the button. It stays highlighted, and it'll stay highlighted until I mouse over another control that has the same functionality. It seems to me it would be better if it went away as soon as you left the control, not waiting until you went to another one. So we're going to show how to do that. So here's an enhanced version where instead of using the mouse over uh, method event, we're going to be using the mouse enter and mouse leave. So the control, pretty much the same code, but in mouse enter is where we'll do the highlighting right here. And then in mouse leave, we can call cancel highlight. So you can predict what this is going to do. Now, when we mouse over, it has the highlighting, but as soon as we leave, it goes away. Similarly on this one. So to me, that's just a better behavior and easy to implement. This is not a subclass. This is not a modification. It's just a change in the way the uh, behavior is implemented over and above what was done in the sample, the way it came from Microsoft. So that's simply the mouse over one. So again, one that was obviously designed to be used on a form. And I hope you're getting a sense now of how we can use these things with virtually no programming at all. I'll spend a little time with the about dialog. This is underscore about box in the dialogues library in the dialogues catalog. You saw a quick look at it earlier when we were kind of exploring the foundation classes. And again, you can customize this for your own particular company and application needs. It has quite a bit of information in it out of the box. And out of the box, it looks like this. And you saw that before. So here's our very simple about box. It's got a place for an image of some kind. It's got a place for the name, version number, copyright, and so forth, and a place for the registered who it's licensed to. So that's the basic functionality. The system info, by the way, is built in. That's this guy, which you probably recognize. Again, not sized very well for our demo, but there we go. So that's built into the application, and it's kind of nice to have, especially if you have tech-savvy users and you need to check some of this stuff. You can ask them to take a look straight from your about box. So that's the basic control out of the box, so to speak. But let's take a look at some enhancements that we can do for it. So here's the first iteration. In this one, I added a picture. So we have the name of an application, that's a property, a version number, a property at this point, copyright, and so forth. And the registered owner is going to be something we fill in later. Here's the class on there, the registry class, and these buttons are as they were before. So that's kind of a first iteration. And if we run that form, then here we go. Now you'll see that the license information is there. That's actually pulled out at runtime is why it didn't show in the design surface. So it didn't take much to do this. and it's kind of a nice little form. I don't know how many of you still uh, develop desktop apps and how many of those you want an about box, but if you do want an about box, this is a very nice way to get one. Working from the dialog box that we just saw, we can add a hyperlink label. And that's again very easy to do. Underscore hyperlink label. It's in the Internet Catalog, and all it needs is a caption and a target. Let's see what that looks like. So here we have our caption and our link to, in this case, my website, and it actually works. I won't click on it because I don't have a browser size down to show here, but uh, out of the box, you just get a clickable link. All you have to do is set the caption and the target, which is, I lost it down there, but anyway, it's there. Uh, oh, I didn't mean to do that. I just clicked it and it opened on my other monitor, so you didn't see it, but there it is. And along the same lines, suppose we wanted that version number to be dynamic. Suppose we wanted to pull the version number out of our executable rather than just having some static name or property value that we had to change. So there's a class called underscore file version. All it is a wrapper around the a get file version class, but it's convenient because it provides a get version method and returns an array. And then one of the elements of the array, the fourth element, I believe, is the version number that we're going to be interested in. So we can take a look at our third iteration of this same form. And now we have the version number here, which is controlled by code in the init. And just arbitrarily, uh, I chose to detect if we're in development mode. I'm going to pick the file I'm going to use is via caption to version plus. So that's what's going on there. And if we run this, then because I'm running in the IDE, this is returning the version from vfp9.exe. If it was running my executable as an app, it would be whatever I had programmed into the build number when I built the executable. So again, easy to do this kind of stuff with very little programming. Set a couple of properties, create an instance, and go. Let's move on beyond the about box now and talk about the Mover Foundation class. There's actually two of them in there. You're probably familiar, certainly, with the concept, if not with these particular classes. The Mover class and the Super Mover class, again, an underscore mover library and the user controls catalog in the component gallery. And the two methods that we're interested in are the initialize choices method and the get selections method. And this, the way this is designed, it wants to work from an array. So you initialize the choices by providing an array that contains the choices you want to allow the user to choose from. And then the get selections method will allow us to retrieve the ones that were selected. So this is your side-by-side list where you can select and unselect from one side to the other. So I'm going to switch over to Fox again, and we'll run this demo. So we'll do the mover class first. So here's what the form looks like. Again, left side is where you selected, and then that get selections method will allow us to get those. So if we run this, I should show you the code, I guess, behind that. In this example, and again, also in your session downloads, I just created a little table called Table Speakers that has a list of all of the speakers for this conference today. And so we're just going to select that into an array, and then we're going to call init choices using that array and passing that array for the values. So when we run that, I want to actually run that from a demo, make it a little easier to get the selections. And here we are. So I'm going to create an instance of this, which I already created in my class library, and then I'll show that. And the reason I did that was to provide a little bit of behavior that made the demonstration run more easily. So we'll go ahead and show that form, and there it is. So on the left is the array values from that table of speakers, and as you can obviously see, in fact, I think you can double click on them, but you can also just click add, and there they are. So if we've selected those two, then when we look at what has been selected, we would expect to see those two names. And again, this is why I did a little demo program and not just run the form directly. This is going to use the get selections method on the selected array and then display them for us in a message box. So here we go. We selected two speakers, and that's the ones we chose. So this is a nice little piece of functionality. It would take quite a bit of programming to do this on our own. Many of you, I'm sure, have your own version of this. There are many of those out there, community developed, our own that we've individually developed. But this one works and it's nice for basic functionality. The super mover class really, I think of it more as a pretty version of the basic one. So let's take a look at it. It's got the same code as the last one, but instead of the add button, it has visual buttons with nice looking icons, add all, remove all. The code again is identical, but when we run it, we now get a nicer appearance. That's why I think I would call it a pretty mover instead of a super mover because the functionality is really the same. So we can choose our three speakers. You can back them off. You can add them back as you would expect. And I really wanted to do this from the demonstration code so that I could show you the results. So again, what we just did, same thing here. There we go. We'll run. Let's select Doug and John and Christoph. And then just to show that it works, again, we're going to use the get selections on the selected array and display those in a message box. And in fact, that's what we selected. So basic functionality, but again, a lot of functionality right out of the box. You don't have to do anything except provide the choices and then get the selected values when you're done. Finally, the last one I want to show you in any detail is the shell execute class called underscore shell execute in the I guess for environment class library in the utilities catalog. Really all this is a wrapper around the shell execute API. Most of us, I'm sure, have probably programmed the shell execute API in our applications directly. It's not difficult. It does take a few lines of code and easily done, but the shell execute foundation class wraps all of that into a little class with a single method called shell execute, in which we can provide at a minimum a file name, a directory if necessary, and an action, which is kind of interesting because the default action on shell execute is to open the file with whatever the default application is for the type of file, whether it's text or PDF or whatever. But that isn't the only choice. You can print, for example. And so we'll see an example of that. And again, I wish I'd chosen a slightly shorter name for this one, but I didn't. So here we are. When you're working with shell execute, there are several values that you might want to pass optionally. And here they are as defined constants. So if you're programming this, here's a reference for you. You can just copy and paste into your code and use the defined constant names in place of the values that they have. But as in all of these demonstrations, because it's just a demonstration, I'm going to use public variables so that they stay in scope. And I'm going to use the public variable ln show maximized instead of using the defined constant name here. So let's go ahead and create an instance of the shell execute class. Now we have LO shell execute, and we can do several things with it. Simple example, let's open a file called sample.txt, which exists in the session downloads folder. So you could run this yourselves. And there we go. So here's Notepad, and there's this little sample text file. Nothing fancy about that. Uh, here's another example of a text file, but this one exists in the home1 directory in FoxPro, which of course is the program files VFP9. So this is called redistribution.txt or redist.txt. So we can open this guy. The difference here is that we are specifying a path, that's the second parameter, and we do not have to specify open, that's the default behavior. So when this is run, it'll do what you expect. And here's the redist.txt file open in Notepad, which is the default application on my machine for text files. Another way to do the same thing is to provide the path and the file name as the first parameter, in which case you don't need the directory as the second parameter. So again, exactly the same result as we had a minute ago, just a different way to do it. What if it's not a text file? What if it's a PDF, for example? In this example, if I were using the defined constants, I would use SW show maximized, but again, I'm going to use my public variable for this. And so this will open a PDF version of that same file, which I created in the session downloads folder that you guys have, in whatever the default application is for PDF files. On my machine, that is the Acrobat PDF reader. So let's see if in fact that works like we expect it to. And there we go. Now it says redist.txt because that's part of the file, but this is a PDF file, redist.pdf, open in our default PDF reader. Here's an example of doing something other than just opening the file. If you pass print as the action parameter, it will in fact print the file. Now in my machine, I use what I consider to be one of the top 10 cool tools of all time, which is called fine print. So with any luck, when I print this, it's going to open it in fine print, which I should be able to show you on the screen here, rather than going straight to the printer. But that behavior is totally determined by whatever the default printer is on your machine. So we're going to print the sample text file, and let's see what we get. Okay, now printing, and this actually showed up on my other monitor, so let me size it more appropriately and then drag it over here for you. This is fine print, which gives you a preview of the whatever is going to be printed. In this case, just that one little page. Let me give another shout out to fine print here. This thing is way worth the money you spend for it. It's not cheap. It's like 70 or 80 bucks, I think. Don't quote me on that, but the amount of time it'll save you is just incredible. First of all, you get to see what'll be printed before you print it, so you don't waste paper. Secondly, you can choose double-sided or not. Thirdly, you can remove graphics. You can go to grayscale instead of color. Lots of other choices here. You can print multiple copies. You can expand this and make it larger if you want to see more in the preview. One of the nicest features is this guy, which allows you to remove a page. So suppose you're going to print something like an acknowledgement of a payment from a website, and you get that one last page that has a single line on it that says copyright XYZ or whatever, and you don't want to print that. You can just delete that one single page. So you can individually work with pages in here. So again, just a shout out to Fine Print, which is an excellent utility. If we want to explore, we can pass a folder name and tell it to tell the action to be explore instead of to open or print. And that actually opens Explorer. Again, it's on my other monitor at the moment. So I'll drag it over here and you can see that it opened program files, Microsoft Visual FoxPro 9. And by the way, there's FFC in there that we were talking about earlier. Lastly, if you just want the user to be able to execute the default application for any file, just pass get file and then point to something. So for example, point to a text file, and there we go. That's one we saw earlier when we were talking about the registry class. So a lot of cool things you can do, and you can do it all with that single shell execute command with the API being handled for you and not having to do any of that coding yourself. So that's the shell execute class. I hope you found that one useful. I do. So having gone through all of those examples, I hope you're getting a feeling for, how they can be used, how easy it is to enhance your applications with them, how little programming is typically involved. But now let's talk about how we can subclass and extend the FoxPro Foundation classes if the base behavior or the out of the box behavior isn't quite what we want it to be. So how do we do that? Well, it's like anything else, a couple ways to go about changing the behavior of something. One is to modify the foundation class directly, not the recommended approach for obvious reasons, because it would change everything across the board in all your applications. You could modify the underscore base class, which would then affect all of the ones that are derived from it. Also, probably not the way to go. So, in my view, as with anything else that you're subclassing, the way to do it is to build your own class library, drop a copy of the class you want in it, and then make your modifications and use it from there instead of from the actual FoxPro Foundation class library. So let's see what that might look like. A couple of different ways to show that. I'm going to show you two just because they seem to work well. One of them is the About dialog, and what I'm simply doing there is taking all of the enhancements that I made along the way in the demonstration that we saw earlier and storing them in a class of my own. I created a class library called mydialogues.vcx and stored my about box, which now has everything in it that I want out of the box, so to speak, without having to reprogram the image and everything else all the time, although the image probably would change for your application. So let's take a look at what that might entail. Now, I've already created the class, and again, you have that in the session download. So I'm not going to run this code, but if you wanted to start from scratch, you would create a class lib of whatever name you wanted to call it, and then you would create a class as the about box underscore about box class from the home. The rest of this is just the dialogues class library. So that's all we'd be doing there. So I've already done that. So again, I'm not going to do this, but here for way of demonstration, I will create an instance of my about box and show it. So here we have that same about box that we saw earlier. and then we can just clean up. So that's just, as with any other class, just a quick way to create a subclass, and that way we haven't affected the base functionality at all. The other one that I want to subclass is the registry, and it's in particular the INI subclass in the registry. So to start, I'll open the class browser and take a look at that class. So we'll open it. Let's see, probably let's go straight to VFPX because I don't want to monkey with the one in program files. So this is where I cloned the VFPX project from the VFPX website. So here we have all of the classes the way they come to us from VFPX, and the one I want to sub work with is registry right here. And this one should be identical to what came with Visual FoxPro anyway, because there are no changes to it as far as I know. So here's the old AnyReg class, and we can see that it's got these four methods. And the init method, if we go ahead and modify it, is that what I wanted to do? Yes. I'm sorry, not the init method, the get any entry method. It's the sequence of the parameters that I'm interested in changing. So the way the default behavior works is that you pass the section, then the entry, then the INI file. This is the return value. And to me, that's backwards because when I think of INI files, I think of the file name, top down, file name, section name, entry name, and then, of course, entry value. So I would like it to behave differently. So obvious candidate for a subclass, and we can look at the subclass there. And here it is. So again, the code to create the class library and the class uh, has already been run. I'm not going to run that again, but let's look at the demonstration. We create an instance of my INI class, and then I'll go back and show you what's different about it. So now I have that instance. Now, when I call get any entry, I can call it in the sequence that I like, INI file, section, entry, and then my return value. And this is the same example that we saw earlier when we were looking at the registry class, but now I'm using my subclass. Same thing here with the write any entry. I did the same change there. If you move the mouse even a little bit, you don't get the execute selection. But there we go. And this returned true, but of course the value is in fact, let's see if I can find Notepad here. So Notepad says, hey, this has been changed. I think what we're going to see is, yeah, it changed it to no. It's what we set right there. So that works just fine. So that's, again, nothing new or earth-shaking here, but we can subclass the foundation classes the same way we could subclass any other class and then work with, the way we want to work with it. So we're coming to the end here. We're doing pretty well on time, so there may be time for questions before the 45 minutes or the hour and 15 minutes is up. Um, Let me finish by talking about how the FoxPro Foundation classes are licensed. So first of all, you've got all of this cool behavior just the way it exists in the classes as they are released from Microsoft. Now you've got behavior that's been corrected to the three bugs that were fixed in the VFP version. And on top of all of that, you may have changes that you yourself have made to make them work a little more the way you might want to in a particular case. What can you do with those changes? This quote from back in 2006 I don't know how to pronounce his name. Is it Milind, I think? I actually met him in Phoenix several years ago, uh, and had a chance to chat with him briefly, I think, on a bus ride, so that was kinda cool. But anyway, I, again, don't like reading slides, but the gist of what he said in his, quote here is that Microsoft wanted to make these classes available for developers to enhance and to distribute their enhancements and share them with the community. So that's VFPX. And in order to do that, Microsoft created a thing called the Microsoft Permissive License, or MS-PL. As I recall, that file, which is ffc_eula.txt, used to be in the VFP9 install folder. I don't find it there anymore, but it is in the FFC project on VFPX. So if you clone or download that project, you will get the full text of that license, which in part says, as you can see on the slide, you have a license to reproduce, create derivative works, and to distribute either the originals and or your derivative works. So basically fulfilling what Milind said in his quote, which is, we want you guys to use this. We want you to improve them or enhance them as you see fit, and we want you to be able to distribute them. If you are working with the VFPX version, there's one more little piece to be aware of, which is there's the shared source license for VFPX. And cherry picking a phrase out of that, basically saying the same thing. You can use it for commercial or non-commercial, and you can modify it and include you can distribute anything you've modified with it. So basically, and again, not an attorney here, but it looks to me like Microsoft and VFPX are giving us license to use, enhance, distribute as we see fit for all of the cool stuff that's in the foundation classes. So let me wrap it up here, and then it looks like we will have time for some questions. By the way, there also will be a Q&A session after this session's time is over. We looked at what the foundation classes are and the fact that they come with VFP. We talked about the latest ones being on VFPX. So again, particularly since that third change to the GDI Plus bug fix has only been on VFPX since April 20th of this year, I would encourage you to go get the latest ones if you haven't already made that change to your version of the GDI Plus class library. We saw that all of the FoxPro Foundation classes come with source code. We looked at different ways to explore them from the class browser itself all the way through the more enhanced component gallery and solution samples. We saw several examples of how to enhance your applications. Again, I cherry picked a number of the foundation classes that I thought were A, useful, and B, were able to be demonstrated well. So what I would encourage you guys to do is to go and start with that A to Z list and just kind of browse it and see what piques your interest. And then dig into it, either in the class browser or by way of the examples and samples that may have been provided by Microsoft, and kind of see what's there. Hopefully you find some things that are useful for you. Again, we learned you can subclass and extend the classes, and you can distribute the foundation classes and your enhancements any way you see fit. So a lot there. Thank you for choosing to attend this session today. I hope you got a lot out of it. Please do fill out your evaluations. Uh, we, the speakers and the organizers, both get a lot of value out of that. We always strive to improve what we're able to present to everybody in these sessions, and the evaluations are really an important part of that. So with that, we will wrap up. I'll stay here in this channel or this session until time has expired. Rick, help me out here. I think I'm going to end my slideshow. And if I stop sharing my screen, will they be able to see me for Q&A? Let's do that. Yeah, how about that? So are you guys seeing me, and can anybody I guess you wanna post questions through the chat. When we get to the Q&A session, I have audio interactive as well, but right now it looks like everything needs to come through the chat.
There were no questions posted.
No questions posted, okay, let's see. Richard said something about a $100 workstation license. I wasn't sure what that was for.
Probably your print tool.
Okay, oh, the, fine print?
Mhm.
It's up to $100 now, that's interesting. Anyway, to me, you're gonna save more than $100 worth of paper over time, so it's worth it. Okay, well, thanks, everybody. I guess, if there are no questions, then we'll go ahead and end this, and I will go ahead and join the Q&A session just for conversation, if for nothing else. Rick, good to go?